Hi, I'm Dan. This is at Midlife Crisis Motorcyclist, and this is proper dream bike stuff in the shape of the CCM Maverick. Now, if you're watching this, I'm going to assume that you probably have a sense of who CCM are and what they do, but for the purposes of introducing the bike, let's just have a little look at the background. Set up in the early 1970s in Bolton by a chap called Alan Cluse, the name stands for Cluse Competition Machines and kind of gives a sense of CCM's background as a builder of various types of competition off-road bikes. It also made bikes for the legendary stuntman Eddie Kidd back in the day. CCM also made a name for itself building bikes for the British Army. Now, as I understand the story, when the Atlantic conveyor was sunk in the Falklands War in 1982, it took with it to the bottom of the sea a large proportion of the British Army's motorbikes, meaning that after the war there was a need for a new bike. And CCM, then under the ownership of the Armstrong Armaments conglomerate, pitched its design. This was called the MT500, a very simple Rotax engine bike. It won the contract and it became the bike for the British Army and beloved of a whole generation of squaddies who just loved its kind of toughness, its simplicity and its dependability. It was also adopted by the Canadian and Jordanian armies, and then the design was licensed to Harley-Davidson. Alongside that, CCM stuck with its kind of core business of building competition bikes for off-road use, all sorts of different disciplines, and has made some absolutely amazing machines along the way, including one called the GP450, which used a very clever bonded aluminium frame, a similar technique to what Lotus pioneered for the Elise and has since been adopted by Aston Martin and many other car manufacturers along the way. This used a single-cylinder BMW engine, and if you think of it, it's kind of like almost like an OG Royal Enfield Himalayan, but with twice the power and 100 kilos less weight. Just weighs 125 kilos, and if you've never seen one, well worth checking out. After that, in 2016, CCM was realising that the whole competition bike market was getting a little bit difficult to make serious money out of, so it decided to build a bit of a fun road bike, a kind of hipster, kind of bobber, cafe racer type thing called the Spitfire. Originally it was only going to make 150 of them, but when that production run sold out pretty much immediately, it realised it was onto a pretty good thing, and that bike has basically become the foundations of the current CCM range as we now know it. Which brings us to the Maverick, which, as you can see, riffs pretty heavily on CCM's tradition of building scramblers and off-road racing bikes of various types. Like the Spitfire, and as far as I can tell, it's the same frame. It's based around this signature tubular steel structure here and uses the same 600cc engine, which, as far as I can tell, has its roots in Husqvarna's period under BMW ownership, and is now built for CCM by an Italian firm called SWM. It has 50 horsepower, 55 newton meters of torque, and not much else. So there's no rider modes, no configurability, no cornering traction control, nothing like that. Twist grip, noisy exhaust, off you go. Now, although the Maverick has that whole kind of classic scrambler look, it's not really an off-road bike in the true sense. It's got a 19-inch front wheel and 17 rear in the kind of classic off-road configuration, but these Marzocchi forks and the monoshock rear, they've only got 120 mil of travel, so although it's got the look, it's not really an off-road machine in the traditional sense. More about posing and looking good, really, which, let's face it, it does really rather well. The attention to detail on this bike is just absolutely off the scale, and this one has got various upgraded parts, but just look at these machine brake levers, the carbon fibre, CNC machining here and here, carbon fibre heat shields, all this kind of stuff. It looks absolutely stunning. Price for the Maverick starts at a pretty burly £12,999, which is, it's a chunk for a single cylinder bike of this type, isn't it? But things escalate pretty rapidly beyond that. So if you choose a bike with the parts this one has, all the machine bits, all the carbon bits, you're getting closer to £15,000. Add a kind of custom tank like that, more money, different saddles. If you want fancy Öhlins forks with a twin brake setup, you can have that, but that's another £2,000 and then some. So it's easy to see how, without too much difficulty, you could end up closer to £20,000, which is, well, it's a lot, isn't it? But then just look at it. It's kind of engineering as art, isn't it? And you would be quite happy just parking that up in your living room and staring at it. But bikes are meant to be ridden, aren't they? So let's get to it. Right, so welcome to the CCM Maverick. A few things to get your head round when you're riding a bike like this. First being that because it's an off-road bike, you've just got this side stand that lifts up as soon as you unweight the bike, like a kind of like an enduro biker across a bike. That's a little bit worrying, a little bit intimidating at times. You just, as soon as you take the weight off the bike, it feels like it's just going to topple over, so that's a little bit worrying, but we're underway now, so that's alright, isn't it? And what are the first impressions? Well, it's loud, isn't it? As you might expect. That Husqvarna derived engine. There's no electronics, no filtration. It's just you and that kind of pint glass sized combustion chamber between your legs, setting fire to 600 cc's of fuel and air several hundred times a second. So no wonder it kind of gets all your hands fizzing, everything fizzing, and it kind of, it sets the tone for the bike really, because it's very, very raw, very noisy, but you know, a little bit uncouth, but isn't that what motorbikes are meant to be like? Especially ones that look like this and sound like this. So yes, it's very exciting from the off, as you might expect and hope. But yeah, that engine really is a kind of dominant feature of the bike. It assaults your senses right from the start, sends the vibes through your bum, through your hands, leaves your hands fizzing and your bum numb, but that's all kind of part of the fun, isn't it? And your connection to it is just super sharp. There's no kind of filtration. You can hear when I downshift just how quick it responds, and I love the fact that that connection to the engine and the gearbox is kind of completely unfiltered. There's no mush in this bike, none whatsoever. That's kind of what you'd hope for, really, isn't it? You know, such a raw looking machine. You know, unlike so many modern bikes, there's just absolutely no, like I say, filtration. The controls are pretty sharp. Those lovely machined brake levers, the response is pretty sharp, even with the single disc setup. The ride, you know, you look at the bike and you think, well, it's going to be a kind of cushy kind of scrambler type bike, isn't it? But no, only 120mm of suspension travel. This is not some kind of bump gobbling off-road machine. This is definitely a kind of road focused bike for all the kind of dual sport tyres and kind of scrambler routes and all that kind of thing. This is not a bike built for going in the dirt. There are probably other CCMs from its back catalogue that are more suited to that. This is just about posing on the road, isn't it? And the experience of riding a bike that looks just so amazing. I say it looks like engineering art, but it rides pretty well too. And I think you have certain expectations from a bike that's like this. You want the riding experience to be as exciting as the looks and sound suggest, and it certainly is. It's just so, I mean, I'm going to be saying raw quite a lot in this, because that's what it is. It's just raw. Raw in sound, raw in feel. It's quite intimidating for a beginner rider like myself, because there's just no slack. But then that's what you expect. Now, I can't imagine many newbie riders are going to be going out spending 20 grand on a boutique retro scrambler like this. So, although I'm a little bit kind of on edge at the value of it and the sharpness of it, I don't begrudge it that at all. That's kind of what you'd hope for. Because let's face it, you don't buy a bike that looks like this for a calm and mellow riding experience, and that's not what you get. Listen to that! Oh man. So you're just having to concentrate here a bit, because like I say, this is a bike that demands your absolute full attention. But what's nice is even at relatively modest speeds, you know, I'm not going crackers here, it's all about the experience. Sure, there are faster bikes out there, more technically advanced ones, but sometimes a motorbike should just be about the experience of riding it, shouldn't it? Doesn't matter about numbers on a speedo or anything else. And here we are with just 50 horsepower, single cylinder engine, absolutely nothing in the way of frills or gimmickry, just a beautiful, beautiful bike. Stunning design, intricate little details. But sometimes the feel-good factor isn't about 200 horsepower and all the latest tech. It's about slightly more emotive things, isn't it? And I think that's why you buy a motorbike like this. Because let's face it, you're not going to be doing a commute on it. You're not going to be buying it for kind of riding through winter. You're going to be buying it because it makes you feel special. And this bike certainly does that. Every step of the way. It's just such an experience. And I think what it does, it encourages you to take maybe, you know, the little roads like this where you might not take a sports bike, but you know, you want to explore the quieter roads, the little ones. Scratch around on the countryside and the dales like this. This is the bike for you. And yeah, it's a bike you're just going to take out just purely for the sake of it, isn't it? Because there's nothing logical or sensible about spending 15 grand, 20 grand whatever it ends up costing you after you've been busy on the configurator. There's no logical reason to buy a motorbike like this, but there is every other reason to do so. Mainly to do with the grin it puts on your face while you ride it, and the grin it puts on your face when you park it up and just stare at it. Yeah, it's an expensive bike, but I reckon probably worth every penny. Right, so there we go, a ride on the CCM Maverick, and can it possibly live up to those amazing looks in the way it goes? Well, I think you'll probably got the gist from my commentary on that video that yes, it is just as exciting and thrilling to ride as you would hope, going by the look and by the price. And I think what I enjoyed most of all, and you'll have to forgive me that I didn't get into the kind of the specifics of stuff like seat height and what brakes it's got and all that kind of stuff. I'm kind of going on the basis that if you've got as far as considering a bike like this, you'll just love it for what it is. And anyway, if there are any specifics that you don't like, the bespoke way that CCM does things mean you can probably change everything anyway. So yeah, no point really trying a kind of cool-headed review. You just got to go with your heart on a bike like this, and it certainly delivers in the thrill factor. I think what I really enjoyed most of all is just the rawness of it. There's no filtration, no distraction from just the experience of riding it. It's very light, 145 kilos, dry. It feels quite small, although the seat's quite high. It still feels very chuckable. It just fits really well. What I think I appreciated most of all was for all the kind of the fact that it's a kind of, you know, the looks of it's a kind of a hipster plaything and all that kind of stuff. When you ride it, you really feel CCM's roots as a builder of proper competition motorbikes. So yeah, it looks like a plaything and it's designed to turn heads and all that kind of stuff, but there's substance behind the way it looks, and just everything in the kind of the component choice, to just the you know, the travel in the brake lever, the way the gearbox bangs through the ratios, all that kind of stuff. You just get the feeling that it's not just a show pony. It's built by people who've decades of building bikes that compete in motocross, that can jump over double-decker buses if you're Eddie Kidd, you know, pull themselves out of muddy bogs with all the army kit on them, all that kind of heritage, all that kind of experience and knowledge. You can feel that in this bike, which is just a nice foundation on which to build a bike that looks as incredible as this. So yeah, there's no logical reason to have a bike like this, certainly no logical reason to spend potentially 20 grand on one, but if you've got the money, if you love the look, why wouldn't you? So there we go, there's a little kind of slightly gushing appraisal of my ride on the CCM Maverick. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did and you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do so. If you've got any questions or want to share any experiences of yourself with CCM products, I'd love to hear from you. And for now, I'll say thanks for watching, goodbye, and ride safe.